Welcome back to Petty Astrology. I'm your host, Kaycee Felton-Lui. There's a lot of confusion in the air. People, even that are paying attention, don't quite know what's going on. And some of that, I think, is intentional. But if you haven't heard, we recently had the north and south nodes of the moon change signs, which is something that happens every year and a half. But this is pretty significant because we are starting a new nodal cycle. And that's part of what is humming in the background of all of this energy. And I think it's important to talk about as we head into this next stretch of time, because it makes some of the themes that we're going to be dealing with collectively and personally pretty clear. And believe it or not, as challenging as it's been already, there are good things in this energy too. Today on the podcast, I talk about the north and south nodes moving into Pisces and Virgo. Then a look at the start of Pisces season and some of the big transits we've got going on this week. This year, on January 28th, the north and south nodes of the moon shifted into the signs of Pisces and Virgo. And if you are newer to astrology, you might be unfamiliar with what the nodes are. And you may not know that every planet has nodes that you can calculate. But the nodes that astrologers are usually talking about are the north and south nodes of the moon. And so this is a calculation point, which means that if you go and look up in the sky with a telescope, you will not be able to see the nodes because it's math. And that math is calculated based on the position of the sun, the moon, and the earth. And astrologers have different interpretations of the nodes depending on what kind of astrology they practice, depending on their own observations and interpretations. And very often, those interpretations will include things like fate or karma or just direction in general. And I think that some of those things certainly apply in how we approach looking at the nodes, which makes sense because if you know anything about eclipses, you know that the north and south node of the moon factor in to the eclipses that we're having in a given time period. So that means that some of the themes of the north node in Pisces and the south node in Virgo are going to be relevant in more ways than one because they're going to be playing into our upcoming eclipses quite a bit. So these themes are going to be pretty loud. And the nodes will be in Pisces and Virgo until August 18th of 2026. So it's a good while that we're going to be looking at this energy and working with this energy. The north node in Pisces has been pointing towards the heaviness and confusion and not knowing what's ahead or even which way is up at times. But the same energy is also giving us opportunities to lean into our creativity, our sense of faith, and our connection to all things, including our connectivity with one another. Because the north node is representative of the direction that we're moving into collectively, whereas the south node is about the past, what's already happened, and often what needs to be adapted in order for us to move forward as a more empowered collective. So with the South Node in Virgo, we're letting go of a lot of things that we're used to. Our sense of order and routine, what we expect, what we think is right. We're having to confront those things and adjust those things because things are just not what they were. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing, although in some cases I know it's been disruptive, disturbing, cruel even. But no planets or nodes or anything else are causing the problems, but they are guiding us to how we can move through them. And given that Pisces and Virgo are both mutable signs, we need to be flexible. We need to adapt and adjust and go with the flow, probably more than we have. That does not mean that we bend over for injustice or letting ourselves or others be exploited, but it does mean that we can't insist on things going a certain way, because we are not in control of the whole big picture, but we are a part of that bigger picture, each and every one of us who is here and now in our shared reality. This is a time period where we want to practice a certain amount of acceptance, and at the same time, not accept the things that we want to change in the world. So we're going to have to hold two seemingly conflicting ideas, very Pisces, at the same time, because they both exist. We have to accept that we aren't in control of everything. We are only really in control of ourselves and the choices that we decide to make. And so we need to have acceptance for that. We need to understand that that's okay, that it isn't all on us as an individual to fix all of the problems of the world, to feel the pain or try to feel the pain of everyone and everything. Because not only is it impossible, it's exhausting, and it's actually going to make you less helpful to everyone to feel what they're feeling or pretend that you can, and to suffer when perhaps it's not your suffering to hold, to experience, but it may very well be your suffering to respond to take action against. Because another thing that is going to be very apparent during this time period is how very connected we are. And as with much of astrology, it's always more than one thing. It's not just the North Node being in Pisces that is behind all of this, but it is one factor here that is really pointing us towards our interconnectivity. We share a planet, we share an energetic experience, a physical experience together, and we do share resources. The air we breathe, the water that we drink, the land that we live on. They're more a part of us than many of our cultures have taught us to think. And for those of us who did grow up in cultures that helped us understand that early on, we can be grateful that we have those teachings and hopefully share them with other people who've been intentionally disconnected from one another, from themselves, from their spiritual experience of this life and understanding how deep it goes. But again, we can't control other people's experiences, how they feel, what they go through. We have to practice our boundaries, our energetic boundaries, because with the North Node in Pisces, there will be a lot of people taking on things that are beyond them emotionally. And again, that's not always the most helpful thing to do. Can we tap into the collective fear and uncertainty that's happening right now? Absolutely. It's probably very easy to do that without even trying. So we need to check in with ourselves regularly. How am I feeling? Is that how I'm feeling in this moment? Is there a way that I can attend to that, to hold space for it, to address it in some way? If maybe some action needs to be taken, maybe some energy needs to be channeled elsewhere. But if what we're feeling is this collective unease that we have access to, we can remind ourselves that it is not ours to carry on our own. Maybe it's a sign that you need to connect with other people about the emotions that you're experiencing, because it's in the air metaphorically. And undoubtedly, a lot of us are going to be feeling a lot of things, and we won't be alone in that. Some of us will want time alone to do that processing, but it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do both in this moment. We can take the time that we need to take to connect, to restore, to lean into the things that on a personal level give us a sense of faith. But there will also be moments where the feelings that we're feeling really don't belong to us. And maybe in that moment, the collective anxiety that we're picking up on isn't ours. It's just not what we're feeling in that moment. And perhaps that we can set aside. Because suffering for suffering's sake isn't going to heal us. And in fact, with the North Node in Pisces, we're being directed to be more compassionate with ourselves, to understand that even in moments of pain and uncertainty, we can still find moments of beauty and joy and connectivity. Those will all still be there. And it doesn't make us less caring to experience those feelings as well. Because yeah, we are having a collective experience, but we're also having that experience as individuals. It is that Piscean complexity that I was talking about. It's both. It's always more than one thing. But the boundaries are going to be important to maintain so we don't feel ourselves into oblivion. There's so much to feel. We could spend forever languishing in our emotions. And it's not that we need to rush things. That would be that Virgo efficiency. We have somewhere to be and we don't have time for this. In some ways, that is true. There are things right now that are urgent, and I don't want to erase that. But at the same time, we need to be able to address those things without burning ourselves into oblivion before we've even started, because the evolution that needs to happen is a longer term thing. We are not supposed to be burning fast and bright right now on everything, because that is going to leave us exhausted and probably prone to error. And another thing about the North Node being in Pisces is there are a lot of cards on the table that we can see. We see some of the moves that are being made here in the United States as a lot of the federal government apparatus is being liquidated, particularly the parts that help the working class. And we know enough, those of us who are paying attention, to see some extremely bad intentions being acted upon. But not all of the cards are on the table. And that's got to be something that we keep in mind over this period. The conservative right wing in the United States has been working towards Project 2025 and the ideals behind it for decades now. So we know what they want, but we may not know all of the mechanisms. And there may be more to the story. In fact, I'm certain that there's more to the story that we're just not going to know right away. But we know enough. We know enough to take action. We know enough to feel that things are really off and that there is danger, and we do need to take action. Because if we have any sense of compassion, as this energy is guiding us to do, how can we possibly stand by and watch the suffering increase? The right thing to do is to take action, to make moves, to not go quietly. So we want to go with the flow emotionally. We want to listen to our intuition. But we don't want to be dead fish. We don't want to be swept up in the rising tide of fascism and be so disconnected and dissociated that we miss the red flags and the opportunities to take action that are presenting themselves every single day. And the other side to this is that we're also not seeing all of the resistance, nor should we be. I don't think people should be announcing everything that they're planning. That would be very unwise. So remember that. Just because you don't see everything happening out in the open, it's not being broadcast, it's not on CNN certainly, doesn't mean that it's not happening, that things aren't in motion. That being said, again, that doesn't mean that you don't do what you need to do. And you need to trust your intuition and develop your intuition and understand when it's right, when you're feeling that tells you, yeah, this is actually the right direction for me to be going in. Trust it, and trust what types of actions you're feeling drawn to, because those are actually going to be the things that you're best at, right? So that's that Virgo South Node, our skills, our abilities, the things we have experience doing. All of those things can be incorporated into your personal forward motion. And your intuition will guide you to use the skills that you already have, the things that you're already good at. And maybe it's little things that you just view as such natural parts of who you are and how your mind works. Because when we organize, when we connect with people, you would be surprised how many seemingly mundane, everyday tasks are really important. It's important that somebody be good at making the spreadsheets. It's important that somebody be good at talking to the media or just talking to people in general. Sometimes it's going to be somebody who can drive a truck and lift heavy stuff. We need to stop assuming that it has to be hard. And that's not to say that we don't have challenges coming, but we need to flow into the things that make sense for us, that feel right for us, because that is going to be a guiding light. That's going to let us know that we're in the right place and that we're meant to be here, that we're meant to take part in this movement that is larger than ourselves, larger than humanity even. This is about our connectivity to the human experience of life on this planet. And if you're here, maybe you think that we are spiritual beings as well as physical beings. And this is what that's about. It's about connecting those things and being in touch with what you believe, what you perceive, how you experience this life. And others will be going through that experience as well, right? We're seeing right-wing Christo-fascists who really, really, truly believe the things that they're asserting, that they're pushing forth on. They are following what their intuition is telling them, for better or for worse. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're ignoring their intuition and they're struggling to maintain control of a culture that is shifting, that is evolving. They're trying to catch the ocean in their hands. It's a very Virgo South Node moment. They're like, we don't like what we're seeing. We don't like the ways that the world is changing. Make America great again. It used to be good. And then those of us who know a thing or two know that that's ridiculous and false and a white supremacist narrative. But this is what these people believe. They've been taught. They've encouraged each other in this way of thinking. And what it is about power and control. And Virgo, at the low notes, can be very controlling energy. They're trying to grab a hold of things that are not for them. And so with that Pisces energy, there's a lack of boundaries. But at the same time, there's this effort to create more boundaries, narrow categories of who makes the cut and who doesn't. And they're going to expect people to be caught up in this current with them. Because as long as you make the cut, well, you should be relieved, right? And don't worry about everyone else. But the fact of the matter is that when everybody is that disposable, nobody's really safe at the end of the day. And there comes that Pisces connectivity. And it's funny because if the people who are trying to assert control using the government apparatus in the United States, if they were really connected to their idea of God, that would be Pisces energy, which is at the highest level love, compassion, total acceptance. It's not the energy of deciding who's disposable and trying to cull populations using eugenics and racism and all of the disgusting, ugly things that fascism involves. It's the furthest thing from God, from an energy that is big enough to be the creator of the universe. Right-wing evangelical Christians sure do make God seem so small. And maybe that is one of the things that becomes very evident during this period as well, because those of us who are familiar with the evangelical Christian right wing know that there's a lot of contrast between the practice of their faith versus what is actually taught by Jesus in the Bible. And Jesus' energy is very Piscean. It is compassionate. It is loving. It's big. It's big. I think that's one of the reasons why Christianity took hold with human beings, because at the core of the narrative, there is this focus on true universal love, which is embodied by Christ. And I'm not a Christian. I'm not telling you what to believe. But what I'm saying is it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that evangelical Christianity and the teachings of Jesus are quite different. And I could see that being really underscored by what we see happen next. And so I do think that if I had to make a prediction here, I would say that we will see some fallout, I think, from people that proclaim themselves to be Christian. And I think we'll still see plenty of people that say they're Christian but will continue acting badly. But I do think that for some people, enough is going to be enough. And I do think that we may start seeing some people turn away and reject this false idea of Christianity that has really taken hold here in the United States and is obviously wreaking havoc on our system of government, on our politics in general. We have a lot of examples of when faith goes too far, when faith gets twisted into something ugly. And I do think that that's something that we all need to be mindful of right now. Are there opportunities for the things that we have faith in to be twisted into something ugly that actually separates us and takes us further from what we really, truly value on a soul level? I think that that is a disconnect that has happened for a lot of people who are Christian, who may be well-intentioned, but have bought into really ugly and white supremacist ideologies that have been sold to them as what it means to be a Christian. And even still, in spiritual spaces that have nothing to do with Christianity, we see people being sold ideas all the time that may or may not be actually in line with that person's core values. Sometimes we can elevate certain people or ideas above us and take them as infallible to the point where we start accepting things that maybe we shouldn't be accepting. That's being a dead fish, right? Is going with the flow when it's really not the flow for you. And so it's going to be an easier time, I think, to be swept up in those moments, because something might start pure. And this is not to inject any fear into the situation or that like you're going to lose your mind, because I don't think that that is going to happen to everybody. But I do think it's really important time to be mindful of where you're letting your faith and your feelings take you. If it's connecting you more to your soul self, to your higher purpose, whatever you feel that is, that's a good sign. But if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling separated, if you're feeling like you don't matter, or that somebody matters more than you, and that they're worth following and listening to and abandoning what's important to you, then maybe that's a sign that you need to slow your roll and check in. Determine if you are engaging in healthy practices for yourself. Maybe set some boundaries. And maybe think about what those boundaries should be ahead of time, so that when you find yourself in a moment where things are confusing or feel unclear, you can reconnect with what's actually important to you, where you want to contain yourself a little bit, where you want to channel your energy to. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. It doesn't have to be a statement of your own controlling nature. But, being completely unbound and unmoored is not the best idea. We never want to abandon the South Node completely, that Virgo energy. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. That's the mind. That's our analytical mind, our ability to think critically and have some common sense. So we don't want to leave that behind, but we also just don't want to get lost in the details and criticize ourselves and overly pick at things that maybe don't benefit from us picking at them. We don't have to solve every mystery during this time because, again, not everything is going to be clear right away, and we can have acceptance for that. We can even find beauty in that and release in that. We don't know everything that is going to happen. And so if we hold on to that Virgo sense of control, or the illusion, that's fun to think about, the illusion of control, because actually we probably don't have as much control as we think we have when we're grabbing those reins and trying to make everything in our life and in our world the way that we think it should be. It's not practical. And it's often an illusion. But that doesn't mean that we throw common sense out the door. Those things can operate together. We can be in flow, and we can also think about the decisions that we're making. We also don't want to go with the flow so much that we might as well just check out. Because if we're just so in our own world, we're really losing that sense of connection that's there. It's a bit of an illusion as well, but it's an illusion that we can engage in, we can hold on to. We can be in fantasy land for the next year and a half if we want to. It might have some consequences that we don't like, but that's a choice that we could make. But I don't think that gets us to where we want to go either. And I'm not sure that is the most compassionate approach for ourselves even to check out, because we're here to experience life. And if you're somebody that holds some type of belief that maybe you are here for a reason, or maybe you chose this particular time to be alive, even though it's really difficult, even though I myself, I'm like, why the hell did I pick this timeline? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure a lot of us have been, feeling that. Like, it's tough. It's tough to be consuming as much reality as we are right now. But the fact of the matter is that a lot of people have been consuming a lot of reality for a long time. And a lot of people have been at a boiling point for a very long time and haven't had their needs addressed. So we also have to have compassion and understand that just because something hasn't happened directly to us doesn't mean that experience doesn't matter, that it doesn't have an impact on us. So if we check out, we're actually not helping ourselves. We're actually not demonstrating care for ourselves, love for ourselves. Because to me, leaning into that Piscean energy would be about loving and trusting yourself enough to know that maybe you did come here for a reason during this difficult time. And maybe you do have something to offer. And maybe you are stronger than you've been told. Maybe you are more connected to the universe, to the planet, to other people than you may have been aware of. And if we lean in to this energy, there will be so many opportunities for us to understand that it really is very interconnected. That when we have compassion for strangers that are falling on hard times or are being oppressed, we are also having compassion for some part of ourselves as well. We might not be able to own those experiences as personal, as something that happened to us, right? But we can hold space for those experiences. We can take action that directs our energy into creating something better. When we take ownership of our energy, when we lean into our intuition and our guidance, that's where we find our spiritual power. And that's the real gift of the North Node in Pisces. I talked a lot more about my specific predictions for the nodes in Pisces and Virgo and 2025 in general in the Astrology of 2025. It's 2 hours of insight and information for the year ahead, and it's streaming right now for sponsors of my Patreon. I'll put the link in the show notes. And if you are a sponsor of this podcast, first of all, thank you for your support. I'm going to do a bonus episode on what the nodes mean for you based on your personal astrology, so stay tuned for that too. Let's talk about some of the astrology that we have coming up. So the sun moved into Pisces on February 18th. Happy Pisces season. And it'll be there until March 20th, which is the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere. And it's also the astrological new year. So if you haven't loved how 2025 has been so far, or you felt stuck, hold on a bit longer, because the spring equinox is actually when many of us will feel more energized and have momentum to move forward. The next few weeks we have the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Neptune all in Pisces along with that North Node. It's a lot of Pisces energy. And Pisces season, when the sun is in Pisces, is already a time where we're wrapping up a cycle. Things are winding down, being gestated and processed, and some things are moving towards a natural end. So if you find yourself feeling especially introspective or in your feelings, that is a natural thing for this time of year. I wouldn't fight it. You may be reflecting on how far you've come over the past year, what you've moved through, and be doing a lot of subconscious processing. That all takes energy. Even though it's not necessarily physical, it's energy. And so remember to make sure that you're resting physically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually as well. A part of taking responsibility for your energy is understanding that it's not always time to drag yourself forward, and that to be effective, we actually need rest and restoration at times. And things often move slower during Pisces season. So take it easy on yourself as you take your action and you make your moves. Fast and direct is not always the right path forward. And this energy is about flow, not force. And remember that there's always more happening under the surface than just the physical actions that you or anyone else takes. And the things I talked about earlier with the North Node in Pisces, this is a month to really lean into those things. Practice leaning into your intuition and flowing into the future that you're trying to manifest very intentionally. And that practice will help carry you through the next year and a half. Things will continue to be active this Pisces season. It's not going to just all shut down, sadly, because of this season. But things are really going to pick up once we move into Aries season. So just keep that in mind as you decide how you want to use your energy over the next few weeks. We're getting ready for more of that forward movement, but we're not quite there yet. And another upcoming transit that we have is going to get us revving our motors, as Mars is finally stationing direct. And that's happening Sunday, February 23rd at 5:59 in the evening Pacific time. It has been retrograde for what feels like forever, but it's actually just been since December 6th. And I don't know about y'all, but this has felt long to me. It's stationed retrograde in the sign of Leo, and it's moved all the way back to 17 degrees Cancer. So for many of us, it may have felt like we've had the brakes on a bit, and that any forward movement we've been making has been a little slow or restrained or just frustrating. But as Mars stations direct this weekend, we'll likely feel the energy pick up a bit. But remember, we have all of that Pisces energy going on too, so it's not the fastest start, but it is a start. On a collective level, on a world level, we will be revisiting some of the issues that came up between late September and early December of 2024. And I know a lot has happened, so we've probably forgotten some of what was going on back then, but don't worry, the universe will continue to refresh our memory until we get close to May of 2025. And on a personal level, this may be the chance to put into practice some of the lessons that we've learned at the end of last year. We've had a lot of time to process and reconsider, but how will we act knowing what we know now? During this Mars retrograde, you've probably had to reconsider actions you've taken and been confronted with your emotional patterns, the limitations of your comfort zone, and your triggers. What will you do with the awarenesses you've gained over this time? If we are conscious, those lessons can help guide us away from simply reacting to what happens to us and direct us to take action that is more aligned with what we care about on a deeper level. Here in the United States, I do think that this will be a time where we see organizing against the ongoing destruction of our federal government take off. And I think enough people are being hit pretty hard, losing their jobs, their families, and vital resources. In our culture, those things can be literal death sentences. So I think the shock is going to wear off here pretty soon, and the organizing that people have been doing will become even more obvious and action-oriented. So the energy of the next few weeks is definitely about slowing down to reconnect, but that reconnection can make our actions more aligned and intentional, and therefore more impactful. Sometimes we've got to slow down to speed up. So don't fight it, flow with it, and see where it takes you. Coming soon, we have some wonderful events planned for our Patreon community. The Petty Astrology Club is where we meet monthly to talk about the astrology of the moment, share our observations, and learn more about using astrology in practical ways so we can enjoy our lives more. If you'd like to join us, our second meeting of 2025 is this Sunday, February 23rd on Zoom. It's a great group of people, a very supportive environment. So even if you're newer to astrology, we're not going to bully you. We like new people. We like learning from one another, and you can learn from people at any level of astrology experience. And we learn a lot together, so I hope you'll join us for that. On Thursday night, February 27th, which is also a new moon, I'll be doing my very first Twitch stream. One of the things I'll be doing on that live stream is going over the basics of what an astrology chart is and how to identify the different pieces of it. So if you have questions about that, make sure that you sign up for my Patreon. It's free, and that's where I'll be sharing all the details as we get closer. That is a free event, so you do not have to give me a dime to be involved, to ask questions, and we'll have some fun together. And if you're a sponsor of this podcast, we also have our very first book club meeting happening in our Discord on March 2nd. We're going to be discussing love in a fucked up world, how to build relationships, hook up, and raise hell together by the amazing Dean Spade. I talk a lot about the importance of connectivity and community as we move forward and build a world that we want to thrive in. And so this conversation is going to be about how we do those things better. I hope you'll join us, and I'll have links for more information in the show notes. If you like this podcast and the work I'm doing here, and you want to become a sponsor, it starts at just $5 a month. As a thank you, you get bonus episodes, our Discord community and events, and more astrology. I am so grateful to sponsors because their support is the reason why I'm able to create any of this for you. And there's a lot more I want to make. Every dollar helps me do that. So thank you, sponsors. That's it for this week's episode. Tune in on Patreon for even more petty astrology. This podcast was written, edited, and produced by me, Kaycee Felton-Lui. Our podcast art was designed by Max Swanson, and our music is by Paul Schneider. The piano piece is by Relaxing Time. This podcast is brought to you by my sponsors over on Patreon.